Think about some of the most memorable moments in video games. When the story hits hardest.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
I'm sorry about your daughter, Joel. But I have lost people too.
You have no idea what loss is.
Everyone I have cared for has either died or left me. Everyone f***ing except for you. So don't tell me that I would be safer with someone else, because the truth is I would just be more scared.
When the tension spikes. When a world feels truly alive. In almost every case, music is doing a huge amount of work. Not just in the background, but at the core of the experience. And yet, in the game industry, composers are rarely considered developers. But if you look closely at what they actually do, how they interact with systems, how they shape gameplay, it's clear they're more than just musicians for hire. Many composers work with middleware like Wwise or FMOD to design interactive music systems. They build state-driven logic, program transitions based on player input, and manage how music evolves based on health, location, time, or tension. Their work isn't just artistic, it's technical, it's systemic, it's embedded in the game's design. So this video is about that. Why composers should be considered video game developers, and why it matters that they are. The term developer gets used a lot in the game industry, but what exactly does it mean? It usually brings to mind coders, designers, technical artists, people who work inside game engines to build systems and features. But if you strip the job titles away, what defines someone as a developer? It's not necessarily about writing code. It's about contributing directly to how the game works. Designing mechanics, implementing systems, building things that respond to the player. A level designer doesn't write the game's engine, but they build the space you play in. A narrative designer might not code, but they shape story systems and branching dialogue. What ties these roles together is that they're building part of the experience, something interactive, systemic, and playable. So that's our working definition, someone who builds part of the interactive experience. Then it makes sense to look at composers through that same lens, not as an exception, but as another form of development. Composers in game development aren't just writing music, they're designing how music behaves, how it reacts to the player, how it evolves based on what's happening in the game. This is where the role becomes systemic. Music in games isn't fixed the way it is in film, it needs to respond. A single track might have multiple layers, different intensities, moods, or instrumentation, all designed to shift in and out based on the game state. Composers often build logic that determines which musical layer plays based on variables like player health, proximity to danger, or narrative triggers. In many cases, they're creating branching, dynamic systems that operate in real time. That is system design. It's not just about composing melodies, it's about structuring behaviors. These music systems are interactive. They use the same principles as gameplay systems: input, state change, feedback. In Celeste, the music is always changing dynamically during platforming. In Red Dead Redemption, there's subtle ambient shifts based on the region or time you're in. And in Doom 2016, combat music escalates with player aggression. These aren't just artistic choices, they're mechanical. They're designed to support pacing, tension, and flow. And they require the same kind of thinking that goes into AI behavior, environmental triggers, or level progression systems. When you look at it that way, the work composers do clearly overlaps with the logic and design thinking we already associate with development roles. It's not just content, it's a system. In modern development, composers don't just deliver audio files and walk away. They're often working directly inside the tools that developers use, integrating music, testing logic, and iterating on how the music behaves during gameplay. Middleware tools like Wwise and FMOD allow composers to build complex audio behavior without needing to write traditional code. But make no mistake, this isn't a drag and drop process. These tools require a solid understanding of variables, parameters, state machines, and logic conditions. A composer might define what a certain musical cue should trigger, how it should fade or switch, and how it relates to in-game elements like player health or enemy proximity. These decisions are implemented inside the development pipeline, often in collaboration with gameplay programmers or designers. Think of it like this. A gameplay designer builds systems around movement or combat. A composer builds systems around emotion and pacing. Both are interactive, both respond to the player, and both are implemented using tools connected to the game engine. This kind of work requires technical fluency. It's not about learning to code, but about thinking in systems. And that's at the core of what development is. When a composer uses middleware to tie musical events to gameplay logic, they're not just adding audio, they're programming behavior. They're developing part of the game. In a typical development cycle, game features are rarely created in isolation. Designers, artists, programmers, and producers all work together to shape how the player experiences the game. Composers are part of the same process. Music isn't created in a vacuum. It has to work with level pacing, enemy behavior, narrative structure, user interface design, sometimes even player psychology. That means composers are part of the design conversation. They need to understand how a feature works, when it triggers, and what it communicates to the player. In many cases, composers attend playtests, adjust based on feedback, and iterate their systems in parallel with other dev departments. Their work has dependencies on game states, triggers, player progress, and their systems can influence the pacing and emotional rhythm of the entire game. The music system cannot exist separately from the game. It has to be aware of it and respond to it. And when that system is deeply tied into gameplay mechanics, the composer becomes part of the game logic loop. That level of integration isn't just technical, it's collaborative. It requires the composer to think like a developer and communicate like a developer. They work inside the same production structure as the rest of the team. So in practice, composers don't just deliver music. They co-develop part of the game's behavior. And that kind of contribution fits squarely within what it means to be a developer. At this point, it's clear that composers are involved in system design, technical integration, and collaborative development. But the way we talk about roles in game creation hasn't always caught up with that reality. This isn't about being underappreciated, it's about clarity. When we use developer to refer only to certain roles, usually programmers or designers, It can unintentionally narrow how we understand the process of making games. Music is part of gameplay, not just the finishing touch. And if we define a developer as someone who builds interactive systems inside a game, then composers clearly qualify, especially where adaptive and reactive music is used. Why does language matter? Because it shapes how teams are formed, when roles are brought in, and how responsibilities are understood. Seeing composers as developers changes when they're involved in the project, how their work is integrated, and how they collaborate across departments. It also opens up possibilities, new workflows, more cohesive design, and a shared vocabulary that bridges art and tech. It's not about redefining development to be more inclusive. It's about recognizing that it already is. So here's the takeaway. If a developer is someone who designs systems, builds interactive experiences, and works within the game's architecture, then in many cases, composers already fit that definition. They're not just creating music, they're designing behavior, shaping player experience, and implementing real-time systems inside the game. That is development work. It may look different from coding or level design, but it serves the same purpose: building the game. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, and hit like if you liked the video, hit dislike if you didn't like it, everything helps. And I see you in the next video. Peace.